The city's in trouble.
It's not safe here for you guys.
But someone is waiting.
I don't like this.
The danger is mounting.
Something's wrong.
But someone is watching.
We'll protect you.
The evil is winning. But someone is fighting back.
Come, there's no more time for talk.
Gargoyles, every Friday.
The story is told, though who can say if it be true, of a clan of medieval warriors awoken in modern-day Manhattan, of the animated series that told their story.
It is an age of darkness. Superstition and the sword rule. It is an age of fear. It is the age of gargoyles.
Welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast.
Hello and welcome to Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast. I'm Zach Joyner, the owner of the website that powers the program, Spidey-Dude.com, and I am the executive producer of the network that powers the program, the Spidey Dude Radio Network. Before we get started, though, I wanted to thank our patrons at patreon.com/Spidey-Dude Network, Greg, Jurgen, Vinkman, Scott, Kaylee, and Phoenician. Thank you for your support. And if you want to get this show earlier, check it out there, as well as other fine perks that you'll get whenever you become a Patreon subscriber. There will be some exclusive content that's only for Patreon subscribers coming to you very soon. But before I turn it over to our hosts, I want to encourage you to check out our other fine programs, such as Spidey Dude Experience, ASM Classics, Make Mine Mayday, Bogan Rider Variety Hour, the Salby Sima Era Podcast, Clone Saga Chronicles, and a Spectacular Radio, a Spectacular Spider-Man related show that starred a few familiar names to the program. Please follow the network on Twitter at Spidey Dude Radio and this show at From Eyrie, and feel free to send them feedback at gargoylesvoices@gmail.com. Leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast catcher, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio Podcasts, Amazon Audible, as well as Google Podcasts. It helps us raise our visibility, and like, share, and subscribe for more at Spidey Dude Network, youtube.com/Spidey Dude Network. Also, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as I mentioned the Twitter threads, but also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Spidey Dude Network, as well as Instagram, if you like Instagram, instagram.com/Spidey Dude Network. With that out of the way, it's absolutely my pleasure to introduce the hosts of our show, Jennifer L. Anderson and Greg Bashansky.
Welcome back, Gargoyles fans, to another episode of Voices from the Eyrie, a Gargoyles podcast. I'm your co-host, Greg Bashansky, and joining me again is my partner in crime, Jennifer L. Anderson.
Hello, everyone.
And we are once again joined by the series co-creator and the co-producer of the first 2 seasons of Gargoyles, and the writer of the SLG comic books Gargoyles and Gargoyles Bad Guys, Mr. Greg Weisman.
Hello again.
And we're very happy to be joined by an animator who worked on the show in Japan. He worked for Walt Disney Television Japan, and on this episode also, Mr. Roy Sato.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Your perspective is one that we are definitely looking forward to hearing. Very often you don't hear from the people who were overseas hand drawing these. So it's I'm really looking forward to...
I've got stories if you want them. Yeah.
Yeah, we're looking forward to picking your brain.
Oh, he's got dirt.
Yeah, maybe I should start with alcohol. I can get some really good stories on this little podcast, but I'll keep it tame for you guys.
Awesome.
So, Roy, tell us a little bit about yourself. What is a little bit about your background and how you got into animation?
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I started off in animation. Basically, I was a fan of drawing back in my college days, and after I tried out kinds of different classes and trying different ideas of how I was going to I was trying to find a career basically, and then I found out, well, maybe art was my thing. But the problem was at the time I was really into anime, and this is like the early 80s, and a lot of people really never heard of it. So I told myself, well, why don't I just go to Japan and learn? So I ended up going to an animation school in Japan, And I studied there and ended up graduating and became a full-fledged animator. I did work for some anime studios early on, but I'm sure you guys have probably heard the stories, but they're not very well paying, and the conditions are pretty bad and all that. So I was pretty close to giving it up, and I thought, oh, maybe animation's not for me. And then a teacher of mine said, hey, why don't you just work for Disney? I was like, oh, you mean like in Florida or California? I said, no, Disney. They're gonna open a studio here in Tokyo. It's like, oh, all right, you speak English. Why don't you give it a try? And famous last words, I was one of the first ones there, and I ended up, working on their TV series. And it started with things like Darkwing Duck, Little Mermaid, Aladdin, whatnot. And this little show called Gargoyles came along, and that was that. But that was my first dip into, the whole Disney 2D animation process. But from there, 2D slowly went away. Disney Japan closed their studios, and a lot of us were forced to either give up or adapt. And by adapt, meaning we all kind of shifted over to 3D animation because that was a big thing. Pixar came to light, and Toy Story was huge, and so we all kind of ended up doing 3D animation. And some of us did it, some of us couldn't. They ended up just doing other things. So, but in my case, I ended up
a hard transition to go from 2D to 3D.
Yeah, for me, it was relatively okay. I mean, I was into computers a little bit, so it wasn't too bad. But a lot of my coworkers, they just could not grasp the concept of, staring at a monitor and opening up, windows and things like that to animate. So it sadly kind of divided the industry a little bit in regards to animation. But for those who did adapt, it was great. And one of my biggest first attempts at it was the Final Fantasy movie. I don't know if you guys remember that. That was like over 20 years
Oh my
ago.
gosh, I do.
Yeah, that was my first attempt. I was actually the lead on that because the industry was so new. They were like, "Hey, man, we'll hire anybody who knows animation." It's like, all right. And I was one of the first ones there. It's like, all right, well, you're the lead animator on this crazy movie we're trying to put together. Okay. Anyway, so that was an interesting chapter. And then from there, the industry blew up and everybody was doing everything. We had the Wachowskis from Matrix come talk to us. I ended up going to some smaller studios. And right now I ended up at Digital Domain, which is a big visual effects house here in LA. And ironically, I'm doing a lot of Disney stuff or Marvel stuff, and it's in a weird way, it's kind of come full circle. So, but it's all 3D. I'm technically doing animation, but I'm also doing what they call previs. It's kind of this nice little middle ground where you're working with the directors and storyboard guys, and you're basically creating animation, but in very rough form. So, you're showing to the directors like, hey, is this what you guys had in mind? And it's basically like a moving storyboard. And then most of the time, the audience doesn't see it. They maybe behind the scenes footage, maybe, but, we're basically creating the movie for the director. And then when they approve it, then it goes to final animation and lighting and rendering and whatnot. So it's a fun process. It's you're still being creative, but you're also still doing animation and whatnot. So it's been a blast. That's what I've been doing for at least 11, 12 years at Digital Domain now here in LA. So that's kind of been my path.
It's fantastic.
It's fun. Yeah. But
Roy, were you on Gargoyles? Did you join? So you joined Disney before Gargoyles started, or during Gargoyles?
It was before. My first show at Disney Japan was Darkwing Duck, and then it went from Little Mermaid and Goof Troop and Bonkers. I don't know if you guys remember that show, Aladdin.
Sure.
And it's funny because Greg, I remember all the paperwork and the stuff you guys sent us because I'm going to be blunt honest here. I was really this close to quitting Disney. I thought, oh, this is kind of lame. We're just doing TV series of all the big movies they're doing here in LA, and I'm like, wow, we feel like second fiddle around here. All we do is just make these TV series for a tiny budget, and we're trying to keep up with all these big titles that are coming out of LA. And then you guys came along, oh, Gargoyles. Oh, okay. This is kind of cool. It looks dark and different. And so, yeah, I was there from day one, to answer your question, Greg. we saw the paperwork that you guys sent, all the test designs and the story ideas and stuff. And I thought, oh, this is great. This is really different. I think this is going to be something really neat. But yeah, that's how it started with me anyway.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And I believe at the time Frank Power came over when once production started. He came over from LA and he spent some time with us. And we talked, and I was one of like maybe 2 native English speakers in the studio. So Frank and I talked a lot. He talked about his toys and stuff like that. And I'd be like, oh, that's cool. This guy's a toy addict. He's a collector. But yeah, it was good to have another English speaker in the studio.
Nice.
Fondest memories working on Gargoyles. Do you have a favorite character to draw?
Oh, the fondest memories, huh? It's funny. Of all the shows I've done, it's funny. I've always kind of gravitated towards female characters, and not because like, oh, I like to draw women or anything. It's just like I like really strong women characters because they're kind of the most interesting to animate. So I kind of gravitated towards Demona because from day one, from the Awakenings episodes, like, wow, this is a pretty badass character, and she was voiced by Deanna Troy. Like, oh, this is I was into Star Trek at the same time too, so I thought, oh boy, this is a really fun character. So early on, we had no footage to base all our animation on because it's not like Aladdin or Little Mermaid or whatever, which had an existing movie, which we always have to look for reference. It's like, okay, well, Ariel moves like this or Aladdin moves like that, and Gargoyles is like, well, this is brand new. Like, we could do anything almost with it as long as great guys approve. So, but yeah, Demona was really interesting for me because she was always this interesting character. She's angry, but she was compassionate, and you're trying to show all these different emotions. And she was a really cool design as well, that crazy hairdo, and she's always carrying these huge weapons and stuff. So she was my favorite character. So anytime she was in a shot, I was like, oh, that was fun for me. That was always the best fun I had. Like the Awakenings episode, like where she's, with a bazooka shooting up the castle and all that. I mean, I was walking around with the studio with this little roll of, like this paper roll, the cardboard tube taped to my arm and just kind of running around the studio trying to act out her shots, People are like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, it's that scene where Demona is shooting her bazooka and da-da-da. Oh, okay, some of us did that, some of us don't do it at all. But I mean, I like that shots. So a lot of times, you just kind of walk around all like, oh yeah, I'm Demona, But yeah, that was the most fun part I thought I had, It was weird because like Japanese animators, especially, they're really different from American ones. They're not overly expressive in real life. They're just really quiet. They hunker down. They do they draw their shots and clock out. Where I'm the one who goes around. I like talking to people and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? Or how should we make Demona act in this shot? Or how should we Goliath do this? And there was a cultural difference, definitely. But I think that was the fun part about that show because being the lone American in there, I was kind of like the go-to guy sometimes. They would ask, like, hey, they're saying this line. We have a translator that translates all the stuff all the storyboards and scripts that get sent to us. But a lot of times things do get lost in the translation. So they'll come to me and say, hey, Roy, what does this mean? What is it? Is this a slang? It's like, oh, yeah, that means this, or blah, blah, blah.
And that's important nuances,
Yeah, it really is because, it's not like Gargoyles had a bunch of, slangs or things that, pop culturally stuff at the time, but there were times where like, yeah, they would say something and then, even if you're like an official translator, you wouldn't know what they're trying to say. So like, I would have to jump in and say, oh, okay, this is what Demona is trying to say, or this is what Xanatos is trying to, imply, or blah, blah, blah. Because, a lot of the animators and stuff, they literally don't know English. They just get these little printouts of what we call timesheets, and they have like, oh, at this frame, the shape of the mouth is an O or an A or an E. So all the dialogue, all the characters talking you see are just going off this little timesheet. The animators don't know what they're saying.
What their
exactly
conversation is.
Yeah. They're flapping their lips, but they don't know what they're saying. So a lot of times, I wasn't an official director or anything by any means, but I go back and say, oh, you know what? I know you're going by this time chart, this time sheet, but this is what they're really trying to say. Like, oh, okay, and they go back and adjust stuff and whatnot. But that was the interesting part of our production.
Roy, did you grow up bilingual, or did you learn it when you moved there?
No, well, I grew up in Hawaii. My parents are Japanese, like straight from Japan, Japanese. So, and I was born in Hawaii, so I got I had the opportunity to kind of grow up with the Japanese language, even though, my first language was English. But I didn't think I would ever use Japanese. I thought, I'm going to be in America for the rest of my life. I don't have to learn Japanese or anything like that. And here I am in Japan, working in Japanese, working on an American show. It kind of messes with your mind a little bit. But yeah.
So you sort of learned by immersion when you got there?
Yeah, pretty much. It's tough because, Greg, I don't know if you've ever been to Japan, but see, if you're a foreigner there, you're like, Japanese, like, oh yeah, he's a foreigner. You can make mistakes, trying to speak Japanese, whatnot. But in my case, I look Japanese, but I wasn't from Japan. So it was always this weird, like, well, you're Japanese, but you're American. I don't know, it was just weird in between. I went there when I was there, but no, it was fun. It wasn't like I was treated bad or anything, but I was kind of always, like I said, I was kind of the go-to guy sometimes when it came to like little weird cultural things like that. And I remember this one.
I think that was helpful, definitely on their end to have someone like that on the.
Yeah.
It was helpful on our end.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't even know it, and it was helpful on our end.
Yeah. I remember this funny story I like to repeat because just to tell you guys some of the behind the scenes stories. But I think it was in one of the Awakenings episodes where Broadway's eating some Chinese food. He's on top of the castle. He's eating boxes of Chinese food and stuff. And the prop designer sat next to me in the studio. And he had these huge pile of books for like American culture or whatever. Like if you had to design a car or a gun or whatever, he'd have these reference books. But the one thing he did not have was of Chinese takeout containers. So, and this is before Google and the internet. So he came over one day and said, "Hey Roy, do you know what a Chinese takeout box looks like?" I'm like, what do you mean? Well, the script says, Broadway needs to be eating Chinese food, and he's supposed to have a spread of Chinese takeout boxes, but I have no idea what they look like. It's like, oh, okay. So I just drew up this simple little Chinese takeout boxes, like, here, this is what they kind of look like. So, oh, okay, great. And it went all the way to final. I mean, that was my 2 cents in the whole, Gargoyles production where I actually designed something. It was a little Chinese container, takeout container. Nice. But it was things like,
man, I didn't even know that, but you saved our hide.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine if, something went through and it wasn't even close to what you guys had in mind. It's like, what the heck is that? And, it's like, oh no, it's unfortunately, I was there designing Chinese food takeout containers.
A little anecdote. Back in 2002, we had the gathering of the Gargoyles Convention in Williamsburg, and you donated headshots of all the major characters. And
I remember that.
I got outbid on them really fast, but I remember you saying Demona was your favorite to draw. She went for the highest. I believe she was almost 1,000 at that auction.
Oh, you serious? Wow. Do you know who went to? I was always kind of curious.
Yes.
Was it somebody
went to Aaron Wheeler, who became the treasurer at the next gathering of the Gargoyles Convention that I hosted, and then he donated it to the auction there, and I don't know to help pay for the costs of the convention.
Where it went from that point, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Okay.
And, I don't know where it went after that, but.
Oh, gotcha. All right. So it might be floating around somewhere out there, huh?
Just FYI, Aaron is so generous to do that because there's no way I would have given that up.
Wow, that's fun.
Very, very nice of Aaron to do that.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I believe we also have an episode to discuss.
That is.
Yeah, I'm really curious. Did you have time to rewatch it, Roy?
Yeah, Jen reminded me that I was like, oh, we're going to be talking about was it Brothers Keeper? Is that what we're talking about? Talk about that? Yeah, I literally just watched it maybe 15 minutes ago just to refresh myself.
Awesome.
Do you remember anything specific that you worked on in that episode?
Yeah, it's funny. It's Well, I did the helicopter chase basically when hyena guys were chasing after Xanatos. There is one shot. Okay, you guys have heard the whole, about the whole hidden Mickey trend and all that. They do at Disneyland or whatever. They hide little Mickeys here and there. Believe it or not, there is a hidden Mickey in that episode, and I think I got away with it. So if you guys want to go back, frame by frame it, whatever you want to do, I have the actual drawing. It's proof that I drew it.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to watch it again.
Okay. Well, I'll give you a hint. It's when Hyena's in her chopper trying to shoot Xanatos, and there's a monitor up, and she says like "rich man, dead man." I think she's trying to. And you see the monitor. She has a little joystick in her hand. So anyway, long story short, a lot of times we don't get designs for certain props, like for example, like the cockpit of the helicopter. Like we get really vague drawings, but sometimes if it's just for one shot, the animator has freedom to do whatever they want. So I designed that cockpit, that little interface with the little TV and the little dials and stuff. So anyway, I was drawing and I thought, oh, wait a minute, there was always these animators trying to sneak in little cute things like whatever. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll try hidden Mickey. So there's 3 dials at the bottom of her console. And the one in the middle is a Mickey Mouse watch. Like there's an actual Mickey with 2 hands pointing at numbers. But
that's awesome.
Yeah, but the thing is, her Hyena's hand and her little joystick is covering it up. But for a couple frames, I think she moves it over to the side, so you can kind of see it. But anyway, that's a little trivia for you in case anybody wants to.
What I find particularly hilarious about that is that down the road, I can't even remember which episode, one of the Puck episodes.
Okay.
We actually had this moment where in the script where Puck pulls out from like a pocket the gigantic Mickey Mouse.
Oh,
watch.
yeah? Uh-huh.
And then our own legal department wouldn't let us do it. And we're like, what?
Really?
And they're like, yeah, you can't do that. We're like,
but it's Disney.
Who's going to do it? Disney?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, this isn't a Mickey Mouse property. This is you can't do that. If we let you do it here, then someone else can do a Mickey Mouse watch. And then, if we tried to sue them for that, then they'd use this as evidence. I'm like, but you own it.
Yeah, it's your property.
I literally am having this conversation where I'm like, you can say we own it, so we can do it. You can't do it because you don't own it. And they're like, no, that's not allowed. And it was mind-boggling to me. I think I must have just repeated the phrase, but you own it 12 times in the conversation. And because I couldn't think of any other argument.
Yeah, you would think that would end the argument.
He does end up pulling out a watch. It's just not, it's just generic instead of a Mickey Mouse watch.
I see. Well, did I just get myself into legal trouble by admitting it?
But there's other hidden Mickeys. That's not the only one, because one of the backgrounds, when they get to Notre Dame, one of the backgrounds on Notre Dame, there are hidden Mickey.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah.
And there you go.
You learn something new every day.
You do. I'm learning.
You just got to sneak it by him. Just don't ask legal. Just
I like the way you think.
Yeah.
Wow.
Me too.
One of the things this episode centers on is the relationship between Elisa and Derek, the older sister and the younger, we'll find out later, middle brother. But
sure.
I was looking at some old development material that I bought on eBay a long time ago, and at one point for a while it seemed like Derek was the older sibling and Elisa was the middle sibling, and I'm watching this and I'm thinking, if they had kept that totally different dynamic, I don't even know what this episode would have looked like beyond being structurally the same, but probably very different in a lot of areas.
Yeah, you mentioned that a bit ago to me, and my reaction is I have no memory of her ever being anything except the oldest. I believe you. I think from relatively early on, we viewed her as the oldest sibling, and I just have no memory of any thoughts that came before that. And part of that, I'm sure, is that, Elise is the oldest of three. I'm the oldest of three. Down the road, we get the Canmore siblings, where Jason is the oldest of three. I think that the oldest of three is sort of my go-to because that's how I grew up.
I'm the oldest of two.
I'm sure it existed, but I cannot remember Elisa ever being the middle child. In my mind, she was always the oldest, but I guess there was a point where we thought, at least considered, having her being the middle kid, but I don't remember it.
So, like, the whole theme of this one is definitely siblings. Like, we're talking about Elisa's siblings, right. Gargoyle siblings, every family and siblings, definitely, like, and this is the first time we see
Hackle and Jaina. I can't believe I said that. And I didn't do it on purpose. It would have been almost clever if I'd done it on purpose, but that's just where my mouth went.
Yeah, so is that like, even our troublemakers in this episode are siblings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the title and that obviously was very conscious, and it was also to some extent, we knew where the 13th episode was going, and so we were sort of laying in even groundwork for Goliath for the 13th episode. So even though Goliath doesn't seem to have any siblings in this episode, he makes a big speech about how he misses that. And so there's a be careful what you wish for aspect to it, which we'll talk more about, I'm sure, next time. But yeah, the idea, and Michael Reeves and I were very conscious of it, was, okay, because we could have put Dingo in the episode. We could have. But we decided, no, let's just stick with the two siblings, Jackal and Hyena. And, let's have, Brooklyn, Lexington, and Broadway, they're Rookery siblings, they're brothers. And, they were always buddies, even back in, the Dark Ages. But, when you're all you've got, you're spending all your time with somebody, your siblings get on your nerves sometimes. And so we tried to sort of show that, and also show that both Goliath and Hudson, it's a neat trick with Hudson because he has no dialogue in the episode. But it sort of show that it's bothering the quote unquote adults that the three kids are basically, treating each other so poorly. And then you have the conflict between Elisa and Derek. And Goliath sort of sitting there going, look, just fix this. Fix it. Well, I can't for this reason. And Goliath says, screw that reason. Just tell him. Tell him about us, Well, that's not going to be enough. And she's coming up with all these excuses. We'll learn more about why Elisa makes these excuses again in season 2. But we sort of intentionally left it vague why she's so reluctant to tell anybody about the gargoyles. But Goliath is like, he's your brother. I trust you. He's your brother. So I trust him. Just tell him about us. And she waits so long that it becomes, at first, difficult to get a word in edgewise. And then later, she's been scooped by Xanatos, who's already sort of pre-prepped his version of the gargoyles and their story and their relationship, so that it's hard for her to get Derek to understand, what she perceives as the truth of the situation, because he's already been pre-biased by David.
He had complete control of the narrative. And even admitted that he made some mistakes. That was a nice touch on his part.
Well, it gives him some sympathy. Like I screwed up. I'm so sorry. So he's admitting he did something wrong. So it doesn't make him sound squeaky clean. It makes it sound believable.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, he's a clever bastard. What do you want? what do you
He's
expect?
the greatest man that ever lived.
Oh, we'll get to that.
I mean,
we're almost there. We'll get to that. On a personal note, when I first watched this episode, I was a little bit excited when it opened at the Diamond Exchange. I spent the better part of my early youth at the Diamond Exchange on 47th Street. My father had a booth there. He worked in the jewelry business, and so it was cool to see. They even filmed a part of Marathon Man with Laurence Olivier back in 1976 at what was then his booth.
Wow.
Interesting.
That's very cool.
Yeah. I mean, nothing to do with the episode.
And
but
I'm sure you watched the episode and you watched the episode and said, that's just what it's like.
There weren't enough Hasidic Jews there.
There weren't enough Hasidic Jews. Got it.
Maybe it was a Friday night.
That was a note that I forgot to give on the boards that came back from Japan. Not enough Hasidic Jews.
I am so sorry to any of our Hasidic Jew listeners. I apologize. I'm Jewish myself, so not Hasidic though, but and I really feel like we get to know Jackal and Hyena here. In their first appearance for The Hunt, it wasn't a cameo, but I don't feel like we got that much of a taste of them here until Hyena whips out the knife.
Yeah, I think that was something, again, that Michael and I discussed, which is that, okay, when they were in a group of 5, there's only so much screen time you can give to each of those 5. And so they become, in their first appearance with the pack, I don't want to say cliches, but because I don't think that, but they're, I'm trying to think of the right word, which is that they're more emblematic. It's like, okay, this is this one, this is this one. You're just getting a taste of each of the 5. Maybe Wolf and Fox got a little more development in that first episode, just a touch, but you're not going very deep on any of them because you're introducing 5 new characters all at once in one 22-minute episode that isn't even really about them. It's about Lexington and Goliath, and also has a bunch of other stuff to cover, right? So here we're like, okay, let's get to know them better, and specifically, let's see the differences between them. What's the difference between Jackal and Hyena? Are they just, we established they were brother and sister. Are they, just a male and female version of each other, or are they different? And so we had discussions about, and I may get this terminology wrong. Nowadays I would have, consulted with someone. Back then we didn't even think to. But, what we discussed back in the day was that Hyena was a psychopath and Jackal was a sociopath. That is, and what that meant to us at the time was that Jackal knew how to fake it. He knew how to operate in normal society without getting called out for what he was. Whereas Hyena didn't. Hyena just was, ready at a moment's notice to murder people, with not a lot of thought to consequence. And you can sort of see that in this episode. Mm-hmm. They're nicely dressed. They're at the Diamond Exchange, and this guy just wants her autograph because she's famous, and he liked the Pack show that she used to be on, and she just pulls out a knife and nearly cuts his throat. At which point, Jackal, who had been preaching patience and preaching calm and all this stuff, well, now it's all hit the fan, right? So he's like, well, can't hide it, so I might as well enjoy myself too. And you see that he's not different from her in terms of what he wants to do. He's just learned how to
mask it,
for lack of a better term, mask it better than she can. And but you know, if there's no point in masking, then I might as well have a good time also.
That entire scene was censored for years on Toon Disney. It starts with the guy asking her, were you on the pack? And she says, why, yes. And then it cuts to Jackal just saying, might as well get in the fun, kicking Xanatos and taking the diamond, which I think kind of makes him look like a psychopath without that context.
Oh, they cut out the bit where she pulls the knife?
Oh, really? They censored it? Wow.
Wow.
It's on Disney Plus, though.
That does really change it.
Yeah.
It totally shifts it to on him being the instigator.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very different.
Yeah, I always thought it was just Deadly Force that I know that one got edited, right, for Toon Disney?
It did.
The whole,
Well,
I mean, we worked on that. So.
There were a ton of little cuts here and there across the series on cable, but on Disney Plus, it's only Deadly Force.
Oh, I'm curious. I mean, just speak from an art point of view. I'm like, what exactly do they cut? Like anything with weapons and stuff? Is that generally what they do?
A lot of stuff with weapons. They'll cut little things like triggers being pulled. I know the entire Coyote sequence in Leader of the Pack is heavily censored. We'll talk about that.
I worked on that episode. Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking of editing, I remember
got cut.
Oh, no way! Wow, even
just the word.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep, just the word. But that was they cut terrorist. Yeah.
That is interesting. Wow. Speaking of, I remember one. I don't know, Greg, if you remember this, but in one of the Wakings episode, you know that it was it was at that boat dock, I think, or that those goons were chasing after Lisa, and they trapped her into that little room, and she steals one of the guns from one of the goons that she knocked out.
Yeah.
I remember initially that gun that she took off the goon was shaped like an actual gun, and then she uses it to shoot back on one of them, and hits one of them. And then I remember early on that thing got kicked back to us saying that, well, we have to change the design of the gun because we just can't have the main hero shooting a gun and hitting and showing them getting, the bad guy getting hit. So we went back and redesigned the gun. So it looks like this little ray gun now. If you go back and you look at it, it's a really strange design.
No, it's a dart gun.
Yeah, that little dart gun thing. Yeah. But initially it was like an actual gun. So I remember that got kicked back to us, and we had to redraw the little shootout part. But that's the only one I remember where we actually had to back up design wise. But usually on the 2D animation front, redos are kind of rare in that, especially when they start getting to shot production. But in 3D, things change all the time. But on 2D, it rarely comes to that.
Speaking of 2D animation, that scene on the rooftop with the spinning helicopter, there will be another spinning helicopter scene later. From what I understand, in 2D animation, it's really hard to spin things 360 degrees like that. Never mind the amount of times.
Yeah, because and speaking of somebody who's a 3D now, it's so easy to do it in 3D because you have a 3D model, you just spin it, boom, you have your spinning helicopter. But like I did the helicopter chase in Brothers Keeper, and then the part where Xanatos' chopper spinning around, when he's trying to regain control. Yeah. I mean, I had to hand draw that. I mean, it was like I literally had to, in my mind, turn this helicopter around my head and draw it, frame by frame. And there was no luxury of opening up your laptop and looking at something with 3D views or anything like that. It was just anything that was mechanical. It usually was a nightmare to draw, and Gargoyles had a lot of it. I mean, they had cars, helicopters, whatever. So, and that episode was full of helicopters, and it was kind of a nightmare because hey, Roy likes to draw helicopters, and they have him draw this scene. Like, no, I don't like drawing helicopters, but that's That's what it came down to be.
So you're their helicopter go-to guy.
Yeah, dude, even in Awakenings, when they're taking apart the castle, all those helicopters flying around, the trucks, pulling that was all me. And I was like, God damn, I'm not the helicopter guy. Come on. but yeah, Brothers Keeper is all about helicopters. So, hey, Roy, you're going to work on the chase scene. Oh, great. Okay.
We'll get to that helicopter in a moment.
But yeah, it's not fun on the production side. Trust me, it's usually anything that's mechanical. It's a very, characters are hard enough, but yeah, when it comes to vehicles.
Well, nowadays, even when we do a show like Young Justice, which is a 2D show, any major vehicle, not just helicopters, certainly helicopters, but not just them, cars, planes, bioship, anything that's, a set, consistent, fixed shape is done 3D with cell shading.
With Toon Shade on it, right? Yeah, yeah.
Right, so it looks like it's 2D. It doesn't jump out if you're doing it.
Yeah,
jump out, and the audience are going, "Wait a minute, is that a 3D item in the middle of my 2D show?" But
back in the day,
but it is.
Yeah. It's
nowadays those vehicles in particular are almost always 3D. Not if it's like a parked car or something like that that's not moving or anything like that. Right. But if you see the limo driving down the street and the camera's pulling around it, it's just way too hard to do that in 2D when we have the resources now to do it in 3.
Yeah. Well, back in the Gargoyles days where there wasn't resources, though, everything was hand drawn.
Right, exactly.
Memory.
Oh yeah, and this is like I said, we didn't really have much resources because it was pre-internet. We couldn't Google what New York streets look like or what a typical American limo looks like, or so it was always like we had this huge pile of like coffee table books where all right, what does a typical American car look like or a helicopter look like, and then and our prop designer would go in there and do his best and try to come up with all the different angles that we animators could use, and it was just a lot of creative interpreting we did back then. But now that I look at it, that's wow, we kind of fooled a lot of people. It's like not most of us were never even in New York, but we kind of try to piece together this whole show that was based in a city that we were never in.
You did a magnificent job, whole team. I'm a New Yorker, trust me. I have high standards for how the city is depicted. You did a great job.
Nailed it.
And I really like that scene where Elisa and Derek are both talking to their parents, and with the juxtaposition of those scenes, the advice that is being given. Ironically, I think Diane is giving the best advice, even if she doesn't have all of the information that is there. But
I feel like they both went to the parent that would be more sympathetic to what they were pitching, kind of thing, for advice. Like of course, Elisa went to her dad. He was the one that was on the force. He's going to side with her on the whole stay a police officer thing, and so I feel like they separated, going to who would favor their view the most.
By the way, I find Peter's argument about staying in the family business ironic, considering what we later learn about him.
Yeah, I think the idea, again, that Michael and I were working towards is that Diane's advice is correct. It's just ironically awful because we know the truth about Xanatos, that neither Diana or Derek know. I also think that, it goes to character for the parents, too, because, when you think about Diane Maz's life, she had a husband who was a cop, and that's scary. You never know when you're going to get that knock on the door in the middle of the night. And then, that multiplies exponentially when your daughter becomes a cop and then your son becomes a cop. And suddenly there are 3 sources of where that late night knock on the door might come. So the notion that her son might actually get out of that business is probably a huge relief to her. But she's still saying the right thing. She's not saying, "Oh, thank God, I never wanted you to be a cop." She's saying, "Look, you've got to do what's right for you," and that is in fact the correct advice. And Elisa goes through the episode. We did this very, with intention, that we love Elisa, but she's wrong here. She's wrong, at almost every level. It's just that she knows stuff that the rest of her family doesn't know. But the fact that she's reluctant to share that doesn't help her case. And so she's wrong about telling Derek what he should and shouldn't be doing, as opposed to just giving him the information so that he can decide. And she and her father are wrong about, trying to push Derek. I mean, Dad even says, "Hey, and he's wrong about this too, but, use guilt. Tell him it'll kill his mother if he does this, And then Mom's like, "Yeah, of course you should quit," So, even if he had been right, even if Mom had been, like, "Oh, no, I really think you should stick with the police," the fact that Peter is sitting there saying, "Use guilt on your brother," that's not a good thing. They're completely wrong. But I think you're right, Jen. They each went to the parent who would be most sympathetic to their point of view. And meanwhile, Goliath is standing back there going, "What the fuck are you doing? Just tell him the truth,"
She does try to tell him, though.
Read the line, but yeah.
She does try to tell him twice, and he, cuts her off both times. Just as she's about to get to the meat of it, he cuts her off.
Right.
I think she could have tried a little bit harder the first time, though. But although I do have a question. I do have a question. As a New Yorker, I've always wondered, where is the Mazda house? Is it Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx? It's not in Manhattan.
No,
it's probably from one of our coffee books, Greg.
Yeah, I don't know that we ever set the answer to that. I'd have to go back and look at an old script to see if we wrote down what it was. But it's clearly, it's clearly outside Manhattan. It could be Staten Island. It could be Queens. It's probably Queens, I guess. Certainly back then it wouldn't have been Brooklyn. So it's probably Queens. It might be Forest Hills near Aunt May's house. I don't know.
There you go. There you go.
They went to school together. Next radio play.
I do have a question for you, Greg. The other Greg, actually. Since you say you're a New Yorker and stuff, that production was all mostly done in Japan, and most of us have never been to New York. But were there any shots or scenes or episodes you're like, man, this is just so way off. This is just not New York? Or were there? I'm always curious because we never got any real time feedback like that, where fans would talk about the episode like this, where because a lot of times when we did those we drew those episodes, we sent it off and that's it. We would never hear about it again. But now that with the internet and talking to you now now I can actually hear the feedback of how you guys feel about each episode. But were there anything that stood out specifically with this episode or any other episode?
If there were, Roy's going to go back and fix it right now.
Yeah. Let me get back with you. Let me redraw that scene for you. Oh God, this is not New York, or my God, you guys got that building so wrong, or was there anything like that? I'm sorry, I'm asking a question for the people who are asking questions, but I'm genuinely curious.
Never on this show ever. It always felt very authentic. Even the episodes where they weren't done by Walt Disney Television Japan, they were done by another studio. I mean, we watched Enter Macbeth a few weeks ago. That episode had some lousy animation, but it still felt like New York. Whereas I can think of another show, I'm not going to name this show, where Times Square is practically 3 blocks away from where the World Trade Center was.
Oh God. Okay. Gotcha. Well, that's good to know. And honestly, it's something that's always bothered me over the years because, like I said, we really had no very good reference material, and all we had were these huge books, picture books of New York, and that's all we based it all of. Even things down to like Lisa's apartment. What should it look like? We just kind of whip something up and like, all right, this is probably what a typical New York apartment looks like or whatever. But, a lot of times for me, and it was like, God, are we even close to what, it's supposed to look like? And, obviously there's an approval process down the road, but I mean, we're always curious as artists, like, well, did we catch the flavor of, did we catch the mood of these, these scenes, or are we totally off? But that's good to hear.
You did, and at the time, for me especially, it made the show feel a little bit more prestigious than a lot of other action cartoons that were on at the time. I mean, there were plenty that took place in New York, but very few of them ever felt like New York. This one did.
Okay. All right. Oh, that's good to know.
Okay, I guess I'll say it. That scene in the locker room. That's all I have to say. That scene in the locker room.
Matt Bluestone wears tidy whities.
And yes, we have reference material for that as well. So, if you guys are planning to ask that question, yes, we do have the same underwear.
Are they tidy whities or were they pale blue? I see.
Well, they were kind of a pale blue, but
You can't make them white. He washed them with his socks.
Yeah, he washed it with his blue shirt.
I like how Morgan, though, is the only one that's like, could you back off a little, Elisa?
Yeah. Everybody else is like,
no one else.
All right,
Everybody's
we
just
got a girl
running
in
for
the
cover
locker
except
room.
Morgan, who's like, could you not?
The reason for that is because the only actor we had on the cast who could do that one-liner was Keith, who plays Morgan. Otherwise, we'd have to recruit another actor, and we can't afford that. So Morgan gets to speak because Keith plays Morgan, and he's already in the episode playing Goliath.
There you go,
doing his double duty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I love how she tells them to close their eyes. She's coming into the guy's locker room and she tells them to close their eyes, and that's hilarious to me. I love that part of her.
Yeah, she's very much in control of the situation.
It was a very Jennifer thing to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure I was thinking of you when we wrote that.
I know you were. Even though you didn't know me then, I know you were.
Not yet, but soon it was coming, I could tell.
I'm so sorry for everything I put you through.
Meanwhile, I hope none of the male cops get the idea of going to the women's locker room there. I don't think it will end as well for them.
All right, well, move on, Greg. Move on.
Earlier we were talking about things that got taken off because of Toon Disney. But did that part get edited out, or did that stay in? Do you know?
I believe it stayed in.
Okay, so they're okay with tidy whities then. All right, they're not good with knives, but they're okay with showing people in underwear. All right.
Wearing just a towel, got just your underpants on, that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
A lot of knife, straight to edit.
Yeah, straight to the editing floor, man. Can't have that.
All the full frontal nudity.
Got it.
We're going to get canceled. Let's move on.
Yeah.
All right. I do like that action sequence, and every time I watch it, I'm thinking, okay, the trio go in there with intent, maybe not necessarily intent, but I don't think they realized that Hyena was wearing a parachute when they threw her or cared.
Do they even know what a parachute is?
Yeah, when
chucking people off the helicopter.
Yeah, I drew that sequence basically, and then that, believe it or not, that's the exact same question. I still remember, even though it was almost 30 years ago, I remember asking that question. It's like, they're killing these guys, right? I mean, they're just throwing them out of the helicopter, and they don't know anything about parachutes or anything like that. So, of course, eventually, I had to draw in the parachute scenes, but I mean, yeah, they went in their full intent with killing them. I mean, they're ripping the canopy off and just throwing them out. Okay, well, boy, this is pretty violent. I mean,
I think that the idea is that, it's medieval sensibilities, which is that these two, Jackal and Hyena, are trying to kill Elisa's brother.
Right.
So that, in essence, makes it fair game to, they're not. It's not like they flew up in a helicopter that was minding its own business. They were
right.
taking clear would-be murderers and saying, you've forfeited your right to live. And fortunately for the show, Jackal and Hyena are better prepared than that. But yeah, I do think they were thinking, yeah, I'm throwing you off a high, a great height, so I expect you to go splat.
Right.
And then you don't, and it's like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
It felt like those old G.I. Joe episodes. I mean, I don't know if you guys ever watched those old ones, but like every time a plane crashes, a helicopter, they always show a guy in a parachute.
A little parachute. Yep.
Yeah. And then I still remember like, oh, okay, there it is. There's a little safety net, and this is how it's going to get past the sensors. We're just going to glide them down in parachutes.
Every time that when they attack that helicopter, every time I watch it, I cringe like I'm like, there's blades right there, the helicopter blades.
Oh, yeah. And I had to draw around those things because we couldn't just have them glide up to the helicopter.
Wings in, kids.
Yeah, you have to get under it and and plus they glide on air. So you think about the physics.
Well, that became the whole thing with Kenner. I mean, the whole reason that our relationship with Kenner soured, on our end, at least, was because of that helicopter. In other words, Kenner was like, we want a Gargoyles helicopter. And we're like, that makes no sense. They fly. Why would they have it? Well, we've changed it so that they glide, not fly. So we want a Gargoyles helicopter. That'll be a big price point, item for us to sell. And so, we wrote this entire episode, not simply for this purpose, but in part to create this helicopter that none of us wanted, but to do a gargoyle-themed styled helicopter. So we took Jackal and Hyena's helicopter, we semi-crash it, right? So it's damaged enough that Lex has to rebuild it, and then we rebuild it with all these,
the gargoyle wings
motif. Yeah, gargoyle wings and the smoke.
Yeah, I remember that design.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then only for Kenner to say to us after the fact, we tried to do the helicopter thing, but the gargoyle wings on the toys are so big that we could never get the helicopter blade, get those gargoyles in the helicopter without the wings getting in the way of the helicopter blade. So we're just not doing that toy. This is something they decided months earlier, but neglected to mention to us.
Of course.
After we jumped through hoops to create this gargoyles helicopter. So, we talked earlier this season about the Gargoyles motorcycle and that's just blowing it up and stuff like that. And it's just sort of like, we wound up with this sort of, and I think on both sides, it's sort of frustrating the counter relationship because of their desire to have more and more vehicles and more things that wasn't inherent to the show. And then we do things for them and then they would wind up not following through on things that they had demanded we put in the show. And that level of frustration made our relationship, which had started out extremely positive, just more and more tense as the second season in particular continued on. And then, Power Rangers came in big in season 2. And so suddenly it was like, why are we doing these toys? They're not selling as well this year as they were last year. And, again, with sort of the hindsight that I have now, I look at that helicopter and go, that helicopter was kind of cool. We probably should have done more with it. Since we went to the trouble of creating it, we then just never see it again. Like, Lexington parked it somewhere and we never bothered doing anything with it ever again. And in a way, it's kind of a shame because, mostly, they're just flying around Manhattan, they gliding around, they don't need it. But we could have done more stuff with it, but we were so annoyed and resentful, collectively, Frank and Michael and I, just sort of like, you made us do it, and now you're not making the toy. And and that we just were like, fine, we're just never going to use it again.
Oh, man.
And that's one of those decisions that, now I look back on and go, okay, that's kind of very immature. And then on the other hand, Michael's argument was always like, we shouldn't be doing this helicopter at all. Like, my memory is that Michael was sort of the voice of, let's not do it at all. Let's just refuse. And I was like, no, we got to do it. And then, so he did, and he did as good a job with it from a script standpoint as anyone could have. And then it looks fairly cool and everything. And then, they never made it, to which, Michael's attitude was like, see,
told you.
Well, they probably used it for a planter.
So, he never wanted it in the first place. So there was not a lot of incentive on our part to use it again. None of us really wanted it. But I think now that, okay, that was an asset we went to the trouble of creating, and we even sort of got the audience at least a little bit invested in the idea of it. And then, it just vanishes. It's never even mentioned again, which is not really our show. Our show never sort of wasted stuff. You'd meet some jogger in Central Park and he'd show up 3 or 4 more times, but, you go to the trouble of creating this helicopter and you never see it again.
Mm.
But kudos to Lexington, who can, in one night, completely fix a crashed helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he is talented.
He is
Very.
So good.
Ironically, if Kenner had made pack toys for the gargoyles to fight, they could have had a pack helicopter for the gargoyles to fight.
There you go.
Could have had a lot of stuff.
They would have put my hidden Mickey in that helicopter if they did. Then I would really give him credit.
Yes. Meanwhile, NECA is doing stuff for the collectors nowadays without any of these we need to sell vehicles stuff, and I really like what they're doing.
Yeah, they're doing some pretty good stuff.
Gargoyles will return.
When they come alive, evil can't survive. Gargoyles. Disguised as a gargoyle, the evil Xanatos swoops into attack. But mighty Goliath breaks free. Lexington fires, and heroic Brooklyn charges into battle on the Ripon Rider Cycle.
Get him!
Xanatos is stunned, and Goliath flies in to unmask him.
Adios, Xanatos!
When gargoyles come alive, evil can't survive. Gargoyles, each sold separately.
Night falls, adventure calls.
We are gargoyles. We live, we soar, we fight. We are gargoyles, protectors of the night. When darkness falls, evil thrives, and stone-cold statues come alive. Goliath, Brooklyn, Lexington, we are gargoyles. Evil Xanatos, deadly trouble, wants to smash us all to rubble, but night brings life. We are gargoyles. We race, we roar, we ride. When gargoyles come alive, evil can't survive. We are gargoyles.
Each sold separately.
Night falls. New adventure calls. We are gargoyles. Wings blast against the night. We are gargoyles, and we've just begun the fight. Hunted by evil Macbeth, he'll hunt us till our final breath. Gargoyles quake, gargoyles awake. Fighting Bronx comes alive. Power wing Goliath makes a power dive. And mighty roar Goliath, eyes ablaze, screams his rage. We are gargoyles. When gargoyles come alive, evil can't survive. Gargoyles. Figures in playset each sold separately. Batteries not included. Night falls. New adventure calls. We are gargoyles, striking through the night. We are gargoyles, and we're climbing to new heights. Dark Demona's out to slay those she loved but did betray. The Night Striker on full attack with Battle Rocket answers back. Climbing Goliath rises high as Hudson lets his big sword fly. We are gargoyles. When gargoyles come alive, evil can't survive. We are gargoyles. Figures and Night Striker vehicle each sold separately.
We now return to Gargoyles.
I think that brings us now, fun little references to Star Wars and Star Trek, both from Brooklyn, which actually is kind of rare for... And DuckTales, which is actually kind of rare for this show because you reference the classics a lot, but you didn't reference pop culture a lot, which ultimately I think was a good thing because that can date a show.
But if someone was going to reference pop culture, it was going to be Brooklyn.
Yes, definitely. Well, Trek and Wars are also timeless. So is DuckTales.
DuckTales. Oh, yeah.
I think we need to discuss...
You got to sing it, man. You can't just say DuckTales. You got to go...
Woo! Are we talking about the new one or the old one?
The old one.
Ah, good.
Classics are the best.
All right. Just making sure.
That's true. Although the new one had Keith David as sort of Goliath at one point.
Oh, man. My friend who works with me at Digital Domain, he's also a Disney fan. He goes, Roy, have you watched the new DuckTales? Like, no, I don't really watch it. He goes, no. If you like gargoyles, I mean, you worked on it. You got to check out this one episode. Like, what the hell are you talking about? So, all
the Gargoyles fans tuned in for that one.
Yeah, they're like, you got to watch DuckTales. Like, what the hell are you guys all talking about? I'm like, okay, I'll watch it. Like, oh, okay. Now I get it. That was pretty nice. I think it was more than.
Oh, sorry.
No, it was just that theme song when it cranked up. Like, oh man, I haven't heard that in like 20 some odd years. That was pretty nice.
It's good.
Yeah.
So Elisa gives up and goes to visit Fox with the full intent of recording her to give it to Derek, knowing that Fox will spew all this information. So that's where we get like she is complete idol worshiping him through that whole conversation, how great he is, and you're so far behind him, it's not even funny, and just
yeah, I mean, that was the moment when we recorded it. I sort of had this. I mean, we got in the script, you get that she admires Xanatos. She works for him. She admires him. But when I heard it recorded, I'm like, oh, she's in love with him.
Laura San Giacomo acts the hell out of that little bit that she has in that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
like you're feeling
and
it.
that moment, I mean, again, one of the things that we planned a lot on this show, obviously. But we also really strove to leave ourselves open for discovery. So, like the previous episode, Archmage was a throwaway villain, right? No. He's interesting. Let's do something with him. But that discovery came in the record, because of how great David Warner was playing this little throwaway villain. And here it was like, oh yeah, she admires Xanatos. She works for him. She admires him, blah, blah, blah. No. I get it now. She's in love with him. And that obviously led to entire storylines for us that we had not thought of until we recorded those lines. And now it seems obvious. I mean, you watch it, and of course she's in love with him. It's so clear. But when we wrote that script, we did not know that. We just discovered it. And it's, for me, as a novice producer, that was one of, the revelatory moments for me about making television, was that idea that you need to be open to all the creators on your team at every level, at every moment, because you never know where you're going to discover something that is just going to open up your world, the world of the show. And no matter how much you plan, you've got to stay open to that stuff. And so that was just that recording session was this kind of really revelatory moment for me. And, I used to break down all the scripts with our voice director, Jamie Thomason, beforehand. And I'm sure I said something along the lines of, yeah, she really admires him. She thinks he's incredible, there's a little bit of hero worship there. And then Laura just took that to another level. And that just really caught us off guard in an incredibly positive way, obviously.
She's one of the most underrated voice actresses on the show. I mean, like you just said, her performance there pretty much changed the course of where the show was headed.
Yeah. I mean, it really did. I mean, one reason she's underrated is that her agent wouldn't let her be credited. But
yeah.
But she did a fantastic job, and she was so fun in the booth. It was great.
That's always good to hear.
Speaking of voice actors, sorry, I know that we're. I met up with Kath Soucie a couple years ago. I was helping direct this video game cinematic, and we ended up hiring a bunch of American voice actors, and we got to choose the actors and actresses, and then Kath Soucie is one of them. And then we needed this child voice, this girl, and I remember her. I think she voiced a character in Rugrats or something. So, but I remember she was Princess, right? In Gargoyles. So I thought, oh yeah, we should hire her, and she's up to it, and she joined it. She joined our project, and then she was in the booth. I helped direct her a little bit, and then afterwards, when we were done, I said, hey, do you remember the show Gargoyles? She goes, oh yeah, of course. And and then I told her, yeah, I was one of the animators on the show. And she just like lit up. I don't know what it is about this show, but the minute you mentioned it, people are just like, yeah, oh, I love that show. I loved working on it, or whatever. Anyway, but Kath Soucie was great, and it was only for a few minutes, but we chatted, and
that's cool.
Like,
that's cool.
Nice.
Yeah, it was just one of those roundabout, like, oh yeah, she's so
wonderful. She really is.
She is super talented. Person. Yeah, and then she ended up doing this girl character for us, and there were a couple scenes where she got super emotional, she had to cry and all that, but she was like full on bawling, like for real in the booth. I'm like, oh boy, here we go, but she was really professional, and then as soon as it was done, we talked a little bit. Yeah, go Gargoyles, I love that show, it was fun. And anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack the conversation
here,
awesome.
That's exactly what we love to hear.
Yeah, it's just these little things. Gargoyles seems to have this little connection even among the pros. People are like, oh yeah, I watched that show, I worked on it, or I love doing the voice of whoever. And anyway, Kath Soucie was definitely one of them.
I really like that entire last sequence at Xanadu. It's a really great action sequence. But before we get into that, I've noticed that there's some nitpickers who love to say, oh, Xanatos isn't as brilliant as this show wants us to think he is. If the Gargoyles hadn't arrived the exact second they did, Hyena would have put a bullet in him. And I'm thinking, A, he probably had a contingency, and you know what? Maybe the guy is willing to put his own life on the line for the scheme to succeed. I don't know, Greg, what do you think?
All of the above. I mean, I think he takes risks. He's always willing to take risks. But yeah, I think he's always got contingency plans in mind. I love that the place is named Xanadu. I think that's probably a Michael Reeves invention. I just find that hilarious. And
Kubla Khan or Charles Foster Kane?
Both. I just, of course Xanatos has a place named Xanadu. It's just perfect.
What else would you call it? I mean,
so it's all good. But yeah, I like that sequence. I love how. I think the action sequence is great, but mostly what I love is how it ends. That scene where Goliath takes everyone to task. I love that. And then the snow starts to fall, and Elisa sort of admits her, what she's been wrong about and everything like that. And it's, I don't know, it felt like a really strong ending to the whole endeavor. And then you go to the clock tower, and all the gargoyles go to sleep, and Elisa's sort of left standing there with the snow coming down. There's a melancholy sense to that I don't think a lot of cartoons were doing in the 90s.
No.
Just sort of ending on this kind of melancholy note of, did we save him? We're not sure. We just don't know. I mean,
we won, but we lost, but we kind of won, but we kind of lost.
Yeah, I mean, Jackal and Hyena are captured, and they'll go to prison, blah, blah, blah. But the point was to save Derek. Did we save him? Will he listen to that tape? and you just don't know.
I always kind of thought he did listen to it, but that he was a little bit arrogant enough to think, I could handle this.
I think that, one of the great things about that is the ambiguity, so I'm going to let everyone decide.
Leave it up.
What did Titania whisper to Fox? No ambiguity is great, I agree. Although when I looked at the animation for this scene, and this is for Roy, I liked how the colors and the lighting were contrasting. This is one of the darker scenes, but also one of the more bright lit scenes, and famously, Batman the Animated Series was animated on black paper, and did this happen here in sequences like that? How do you do a sequence like that?
Well, for starters, anything with snow is always hard to render like in 2D because you're playing with a lot of whites, and then in Show of the Gargoyles where everything's potentially very dark, it really messes up with the composition of a shot because you're trying to show all this bright snow, but there's a lot of dark characters, the sky's black, and we didn't do anything special like the Batman series, because in Gargoyle's case, we didn't really experiment.
Frank and I didn't want that.
Yeah, we didn't. I don't remember experimenting. In Aladdin, we did some experimenting with like different color cells and stuff like that, just to give it was ironically a snow episode in Aladdin where we tried using different color lines and stuff for our cells. But in that episode of Gargoyles, no, we didn't do anything special. But it was just basically the paint department being really good with their colors and making sure things read because you have such a strong contrast of lights and darks.
Lighting was awesome.
Yeah, and then again, it's 2D, and it's not like 3D where you can, we'll just throw an interactive light in there and light it up. It's like, no, this is 2D. You have to know what it looks like before you put a pencil down or a paintbrush down. So, and like I said, these snow shots are often really difficult to show convincingly, even in a cartoon like this. So, but that's great to hear. just hearing this, the feedback from you guys, because again, we never get feedback from these episodes, especially back, shows we did in the 90s where there is no internet or YouTube, comment section or anything where, fans are, responding to how these episodes are.
You can't go see the ratings on IMDb or anything.
No, it was just
none of that was there.
Yeah, we ship it all up back to Greg. And that's it. That's the last we hear of it. And if I'm lucky, maybe a relative or somebody in Hawaii records it off on their VHS and sends me the tape or something. That was the extent of, seeing my own work, it was kind of sad because, it's a lot of times it's just we work on it and we move on. We don't see it, but hearing how you guys are responding to like stuff like like the snow stuff, it's really interesting. I've never really gotten feedback from any of that, but good to hear.
Yeah, there are a lot of great. Also all those lighting effects, were all really great. Yeah, done in 2D. It's hard stuff, but Jack and Hyena are wearing night vision goggles, and then Lex shines the helicopter spotlight right in their eyes, and so they're in essence blind for the rest of the fight.
Retinas are overrated.
But
anyway.
all this great lighting throughout it, as Jen was saying, it's great contrasts and bright lights, darkness, all this sort of stuff.
Usually it came down to we basically have a painting department, and it's usually one or two people that supervise it, and they're the ones that control the colors and the contrast, and then literally right next to our painting department is the background department, and they usually work hand in hand because obviously the backgrounds have to match the colors and they use on the cells and stuff. So it's kind of like its own little department. So when, for example, like the snow stuff you're talking about, the background artist has to work with the cell shaders and make sure everything kind of works as one, and it's a really laborious process. And then when you start mixing special effects like lights and stuff like that, then we also have an effects guy who literally was just this one guy that used to work with us, and he'll handle anything from water, lights, effects, waves, and everything. It's just one guy who did everything. And unlike 3D, where like say, oh, there's a spotlight, and then okay, well that means they have to find a way to show that in 2D, where there's just like cutting a hole in the cell and putting a light behind it when they're filming it, or it's a lot of old school techniques, but it's very laborious. And that episode, I remember being, well, it was a lot of hard work. Snow and helicopters and whatnot. It was a very effects heavy show.
Well, for what it's worth, it shows. I mean, it shows.
Yeah.
It's all up there on the screen. All that hard work paid off. It's there.
It's a beautiful episode. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. It really was. Well, except for the spinning helicopters. God, that drove. and to make it worse, I just got some flashbacks. I think Xanatos' chopper had like an actual like Xanatos logo on the side with like it has the word like Xanatos on it. So when that thing's spinning around 360 degrees, you have to draw that logo spinning around 360 degrees. I remember hating doing that. And every time Xanatos' chopper showed up, it's like, oh my God, dude. Can it just be something simple?
You get the sense that Roy's having some PTSD over there.
Dude, I was telling Jen, I was like, okay, I hope you're okay with me trying to remember all these 30-year-old memories, but I hope it don't go down the wrong road here.
It's coming back a little too hard, huh?
Yeah, it's like, oh, God, I hated that show. Oh, man.
I'm sure Xanatos appreciates your efforts.
Yeah, that's good. But yeah, it's his stuff was really fun to work on. I mean, even Xanatos too as a character, just the drama stuff. He was an interesting character, design wise too. He has a lot of clean lines, very sharp, very clean character. So, like in the Awakenings, when I drew with when he was getting all beat up when the castle was falling apart and all that. I mean, I drew Xanatos in that episode, but it was really interesting. He's a fun character to draw as well. It's a very big contrast from Demono, who's has a lot of sharp angles and spiky hair, and she got the wings and the tail, and Xanatos is this clean cut guy with a suit. He was another fun character to draw. Yeah.
I have a question. Fox's eye. Is it tattoo? Is it makeup? Is it a birthmark?
It's a tattoo.
It's a tattoo.
I don't think they were giving her makeup in prison.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, I posted a screenshot of her on my personal Facebook, and I said, Fox is hardcore, and how many of you would get a face tattoo? And then Greg Guler and Frank Parr, who I'm friends with on Facebook, commented, and Greg Guler said, not a tattoo, and then Frank said that he thought it was a birthmark, especially considering her later heritage, and that she may have tattooed it later to make it more symmetrical, but and then Greg Guler kind of clarified that back then Disney wouldn't allow tattoos, so they would say at the offices it's makeup.
There we go again.
They may have had all these rationales, but I'm telling you, it's a tattoo.
Flat out.
Well, you heard it.
They can rationalize it however they need to, but it's a tattoo.
Yeah. I mean, maybe at some point some executive said, "What is that?" And Greg said, it's just makeup." Oh, okay, that's all right. But we can't do tattoos. But no one ever actually asked me, and I might have been stupid enough to say it's a tattoo, and they would have said no. But it never happened.
I like it. I like that it's a tattoo. It means Fox
By the way,
is badass and hardcore.
Yeah, that's it exactly. She was hardcore. She was committed to her persona. Guys, I've got to wrap this up pretty quick on mine. Right, you guys can keep talking, but I've got.
Finish. All right, Greg, do you have anything you want to plug before you go? This will be going up on June 10th.
June 10th. On June 9th, so just yesterday, the final episode of Young Justice Phantoms appeared for the first time, dropped on HBO Max. So if you haven't seen it yet, please go see that and all of Season 4. And for that matter, all of Seasons 1, 2, and 3. And it means that within a month, the new companion comic book canon to the series, Young Justice Targets, will begin coming out also in June and July. 6-issue miniseries set after just after Phantom, but with flashback sequences that go all the way back to season 1. That's written by me and penciled and inked by Christopher Jones, who worked on the show this season as a storyboard revisionist and is currently a storyboard artist on the Harley Quinn show, and who obviously is one of the main pencilers of the original Young Justice companion comic from that we did back during season 1 and 2 of the series. And the colors are by Jason. He did, yes. And the colors are by Jason Wright. So if you've seen those promotional posters this season on the internet, those were laid out by Brandon Vietti, penciled and inked by Chris. And the colors were by Jason Wright. So Jason stepped off those promotional posters right into doing covers and pages of Young Justice Target. And Roy, I just want to tell you how great it was to talk to you tonight, and
likewise.
And hear your stories. And I'm sorry I have to run, but I've got.
We should do this again soon.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
Got more stories to tell. Next time we'll do it drunk.
You guys keep talking, but I got to get going.
All right.
Get out of here.
Have a good night, Greg.
All right, Greg. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
All right.
About that Young Justice finale, which quote-unquote aired yesterday, I think making Dick Grayson a robot was a creative misstep.
You're such a dork. Okay. Roy, this is something I really am curious about.
Okay.
Just if they brought back Gargoyles today as an animated project.
Okay.
Continuation of how it was, what would be different about how the process would go compared to back in the 90s?
Wow. Okay.
What all has changed?
Boy, that is a really interesting question. It's funny because my wife and I were talking about that once in a while. I think you remember my wife, Michelle, or Kiva, is the name she used to go by. Yeah. But, we often talk about what if they restarted this series? Like, how would they do it? Would they be able to do it? Well, for one, I've been in production for so long, and usually the way these things work is that sometimes you just get the perfect storm of cool talent at the time, and they happen to just land on this one project, and it works perfectly well, and that's why you get what you get. So technically, I guess, you could start up another Gargoyle series. You find another studio. Disney Japan, of course, doesn't exist anymore. But you would find somewhere else and, have maybe Greg write the episodes, get a strong team. But it would be, I don't know. I'm just not a fan of sometimes rebooting stuff that's been done for so long, because you kind of start with these expectations it's just going to be exactly like the way it left off or whatever, and then it just becomes either the greatest thing on earth or it just becomes this huge disappointment. It wasn't like that when I was watching the show, or stuff like that. Technically,
and they're doing that so often now. You're seeing so much stuff, new. DuckTales and stuff like that. Yeah,
I was watching that one with a really, keen eye, because they're technically rebooting a quote classical, Disney TV show, totally different style, different actors, whatnot, and I'm sure it had its fans, but it's different. It's just not the same show. So
right.
That's why I'm kind of leery about when there's talk about let's get the Gargoyle series going. Unless you literally can get most of the same crew,
or they would have to the fandom would probably eat people if they didn't get Greg on board.
Yeah, there's just so many elements I think that just need to be in place for an actual reboot where the fans will be happy and the quality would be the same.
Well, a revival, not really a reboot. A reboot would be a do-over from day one, but
yeah, but a revival or continuation or whatever you want to call it. But for example, the Walt Disney Animation Japan crew. They're technically still around. They're at a studio called I forgot the name of the studio. Oh no, I totally blanked my mind. Anyway, but they're still in Japan. I mean, the most of the crew still exists, including the guy who ran Walt Disney Animation Studios Japan. So, for example, let's say Greg says, "Hey, I got this huge budget. I want to do a couple of episodes of Gargoyles." I mean, technically, it's possible. You could just go to the studio and, hire the same crew, and you probably could get something that's pretty decent.
Would production be like similar to what it was? Like we know that you would be sending it back on a hard drive back and forth instead of.
I mean, it's been a while since I've seen an actual, inside an actual 2D animation studio. But I know in Japan they still do things the old-fashioned way, where you still draw on paper, you transfer it to cells and paint it by hand. So, I mean, if Disney was willing to keep that same type of production, where the writing and whatever pre-production is done here in the States, and then actual production is done overseas. Yeah, I mean, it could happen. I mean, the quality could be very similar, if not the same. But it has to be like the perfect storm of talent, and production values, and and of course the budget. I mean, when I don't know if Greg's ever mentioned it, but like we were always on a shoestring budget because of television. We never had that huge budget of feature films. So if I showed you the kind of schedule we had, I mean, it would just be mind blowing. It's like we were trying to put an episode together every 30 days or 60 days, and then we had to get it done from script to film, so quickly. And I'm just not sure if production houses are geared to do that anymore with 2D animation, because it's just fallen so behind compared to 3D. Everybody's doing 3D,
right.
So, if not, they outsource it to, China or Korea or something like that. But yeah, just to answer your question, sure. I mean, it's possible. But personally, I don't know if I would want to see it continued. Unless
no, I get it. Like there's like hesitation. Like you've got lightning in a bottle here, and
do you? It's like Star Wars. We know when Force Awakens started. Where everybody's like, oh yeah, you got all these. It seems like they got the right elements and blah blah blah, and it can go badly real quickly, or it can shoot to the stars. Say, wow, they got it right. This is great. And as creators, it's really hard to tell. You think, oh, you guys are at the forefront. You guys know this stuff, right? I say, no, you really can't tell until it's really done in the theaters, or on TV in this case, where,
right.
It's like, all right, well, let's say we do reboot Gargoyles and we get a studio that's kind of similar to what we used to do. And, well, if the style's different, but, we get some of the same actors to do it. Will it be a hit? I don't know. It's a different era,
Greg and Brandon Vietti had a hit twice. They were able to bring back Young Justice successfully, so you never know.
Yeah, it's really a crapshoot. I mean, like a more recent story, I guess, for me personally is like I worked on the last Spider-Man movie, No Way Home, and then we thought that. Yeah, and people are like, they're just going crazy. Or like, oh, I made $1 billion, whatever, right? And then, ironically, the next show I worked on was Morbius, which was, excuse the term, it was a shit show because it was just horribly directed. Jared Leto was, he was just Jared Leto, and you think, oh, he's following the coattails of a Spider-Man hit, right? This should be a hit movie, and it did horribly, and it was just a bad movie, but but we didn't know at the time. We thought, oh, okay, it seems to have the right elements, right? It's still in the Spider-Man universe. It'll probably be big, and yeah. And then once you see the final edit, you're like, oh, okay, this is not going to work, or So you can be so. You can plan it. You think you can plan it so well, then oh yeah, we got the right ingredients. This is going to be a smash hit, and then we just don't know, So, yeah, it's a weird business.
Yeah. So can you tell us what you're working on now, or what is?
Well, oh boy, I'll tell you the thing. No? Yeah, well, yes and no. I mean, the thing with Disney and Marvel, man, they're just. I don't know where they are with their legalities. Sometimes they don't want to even talk about stuff. But what can I see? Well, it's the latest project. So I finished Morbius. Doctor Strange coming out, I think, next month. Yeah. I did a little bit on that. The show I'm working on now, I can't say, but it's been in the news for over a year. So let's just say it's part 2 to a movie I've already worked on before. So
okay,
nice.
Yeah, so it's another big one. But yeah, Marvel, Disney, they keep us busy. It's funny. Like I was saying earlier, like I don't work for Disney anymore, but man, I'm sure working on a lot of Disney stuff. Well, then again, they buy everything, so it's like every show we work on is Disney.
Right.
Know?
Yeah.
I worked on Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds. I don't know if you guys saw that. But
I loved that movie.
I worked on that one as well, and at the time it was a Fox movie. So we thought, okay, this has nothing to do with Disney, right? We'll do whatever. And then all of a sudden, I worked on this fight scene where Ryan Reynolds takes out a lightsaber and kicks out Captain America's shield, and we're like, wait a minute, are we allowed to? Are we allowed to do this? I mean, I was literally doing those shots. Like, wait a minute, he literally takes out Captain America's shield. Like, are we going to get trouble for this? I
feel like this is like a callback to the whole Puck pulling out the Mickey Mouse watch.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, well, but this is like not even a hidden one. This is like in your face. Like they're gonna play the Star Wars theme and everything when the lightsaber goes. Like no. But anyway, that happened to be right at the time where Disney bought Fox.
Bought him out.
So it slipped it right in that time where okay, I guess we can use Disney property in a Fox film. So that was an interesting project. But it's things like that. It's just, you really don't know where things go as you're working on these things. Like, is it going to be a hit? Is it going to be a failure? Or am I going to be working on a Disney film, Fox film? It's just, everything just kind of blends in right now,
As long as they get you that paycheck.
Yeah, in the end, I mean, I'll be blunt honest with you guys. I mean, as long as, it's a paying job, I mean, I'm sure as a fan, you're like, oh, yeah, this is great. Next Doctor Strange, next Spider-Man's coming out, whatever. But, on this end, it's like, oh, okay. As long as I'm getting paid, as long as I can pay my bills.
9 to 5. You're
9
40
to 5.
hours a week.
Yeah, I turn on my computer. Next show, all right. Yeah. It's interesting, too, because I don't know if I ever got to explain the previous process too much. But it's like animation, but a lot of times we actually do go to set because we have to help the director, visualize a lot of his work. And so, we're on the set with the actors sometimes, and, we get to mess around and, help basically create his movies. So it's a different creative process. But with these Marvel films, it's like that. You're just on these huge sets with the actors, and they're like, oh, okay, you're trying to make this crazy movie with $bazillion. But yeah, it's a fun job, Beats awesome. Burgers, yeah.
Obviously not a Disney or Marvel movie, but you turn that tennis ball on a stick that Ian McKellen is yelling at into the Balrog.
Oh man, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say this, but okay, like there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. I know we were joking about this earlier about like stuff I can that happens behind the scenes, but like I remember. This is for a Disney film. It was actually for Jungle Book. I don't know if you guys watched the latest one. Anyway, so I worked on that, and then during previs, sometimes we use motion capture. That system where you just put little balls all over the actor, and we can have them act out stuff, and then we can put them onto our little computer characters and make them walk around and stuff. Anyway, but the problem is that this whole movie was about animals, so. Aside from the kid, it's like, all right, well, are we gonna hand animate all these animals, or do you want us? Are they gonna use motion capture or what? And then so they insisted on using motion capture. I was like, well, okay, well, how are you gonna motion capture real wolves or bears and stuff like that? No, they're gonna use actors. Like, oh, all right. So anyway, gosh, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this. But all right, so
in my mind, I was like imagining them putting like this outfit on a lion. And
so you guys know about like those Chinese lion dancers, like those ones.
Yeah.
Okay, imagine. So we had to have a bunch of wolves, and then they motion captured it. So we have some reference of these little wolves and the wolf pack and all that. And the data we got back, oh my God, man, it was just literally these two actors that were joined at the hip with this piece of foam, and the front legs and the back legs were, obviously two different people, and we had to use it to move our wolves around. So you have these weirdly moving wolves where like they just don't move in unison. Like the back legs would do its own thing, and the front legs would bend in half in the wrong way, and like it was a disaster.
It's like those horse costumes, like.
Yeah, exactly. Like like how those cartoons always make it look funny because the front and the back never get coordinated. Anyway, it was like that, and I was like, oh my god, this is a disaster. But anyway, that was one of the funnier memories of behind the scenes that we all have to deal with. But it was a Disney film. You think, oh, they would know better, but no. Because you have money.
You have money, all the money in the world.
Yep. But yeah. But yeah.
You think Disney would know better about a lot of things. They don't know what they have with this property.
That is so true.
We got some comics out of them, and
yeah.
Like that. So I mean,
hopefully more. And new action figures, so hopefully more.
All right, there you go.
I love it. All right, Roy, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so much fun and informative and wonderful. Yes. I'm really excited that you were able to join us.
Oh, I enjoyed myself, and thanks for inviting me. It was if you guys ever need to hear more behind the stories talk, then ring me up.
Excellent.
Oh, we would love that. And before we go, just want to say the first time I ever heard of you, I actually heard of you before I'd ever heard of Greg Weisman. I wasn't on the internet yet. I didn't know who Greg Weisman was. I knew some of the voice actors were, but Marvel had a comic book coming out, and I believe you had a letter published in it.
Oh my God, yeah. I remember that. I wrote a comic book back in the day. I forgot what I said, but I remember... I think I just wanted to put my name out there saying I was one of the animators on the show or something, and I wrote, and I think they published it, right?
They did.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, man.
Vishansky,
wow.
You are such a nerd.
Wow. Man, you just dusted off that little piece of history.
That's what makes us a good team. What are you?
Wow.
Awesome.
Dude.
I'm such a nerd. She's more of a nerd than I am. Trust me.
Oh, man. Wow. Okay. All right. Wow. I'm almost embarrassed to admit that. I remember writing that I remember writing that. I mean, I probably have that issue somewhere too. All right. Amazing.
Is there anything that you want to promote?
Well, unfortunately, I can't admit what I'm working on right now, but all I can say is just keep watching those Marvel movies, and you'll probably see my name go by in a millisecond, and that's it.
Awesome.
Well, people are sitting through the credits.
Yeah, right. They're just waiting for that post-credit scene. But yeah.
Give Kiva our love.
Oh, definitely. And thanks, guys. Really, it was really fun. It was a blast.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Thank you
guys
so much for coming.
No, thanks for everything, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
And I want to thank our listeners for listening. I hope you enjoyed it, and tune in next time for Reawakening. We're at the end of season 1.
Would you like an autograph? How about I write it across your face?